The Allen Lund Company is celebrating 48 years in transportation. Stop by and see us at Matt's, booth 18193.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
The Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance has updated its out-of-service criteria, and the changes go into effect on April 1st. Carrie Wierakowski, CVSA's Director of Inspection Programs, explains what changes were made and why. From the Truck Leasing Task Force meeting at MATS and British Columbia's crackdown on infrastructure crashes to speed limiter legislation and more, Scott Thompson sits down with Mark Schremer and Ryan Witkowski of Landline Magazine for a roundtable discussion of the biggest stories in trucking right now. And finally, OOIDA's Fighting for Truckers website just got a fresh coat of paint along with some other updates. Jay Grimes, OOIDA's Director of Federal Affairs, joins the program to talk about the newly redesigned website, which makes it easier than ever to contact lawmakers about trucking issues. But first, the news with Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. Our top story today: a pair of trucking-related bills are on the move in the House of Representatives. First, a resolution to rescind the U.S. Department of Labor's worker classification rule passed through the House Committee on Education and Workforce. In January, the Department of Labor released a 339-page final rule with the stated purpose of preventing companies from misclassifying workers as independent contractors. The action, which officially took effect on March 11th, replaces a former Trump administration rule that focused on control and profit and replaces it with a totality of circumstances test. Earlier this month, Representative Kevin Kiley of California introduced a Congressional Review Act resolution that would void the new rule. A similar resolution has also been introduced in the Senate. Meanwhile, the Prove It Act, a bipartisan bill that would force federal agencies to consider how regulations would affect small businesses, passed through the House Judiciary Committee. Its sponsor, Congressman Brad Finstad of Minnesota, said in a news release that the Prove It Act would give small businesses a seat at the table during the regulatory process by requiring government agencies to assess and limit the direct and indirect costs of their rules and regulations. The number of trailers ordered in February went up or they went down, depending on which metric you're using. ACT Research says preliminary data show that trailer orders came in at just over 20,000 last month. That's down about 21% compared to February of last year, but up considerably, nearly 50% compared to the previous month. In a statement, ACT Research said the data continues to indicate that fleets either aren't able or aren't willing to purchase equipment because they aren't making as much money. A new report shows a significant spike in cargo theft nationwide last year. CargoNet says there were more than 2,800 incidents of cargo theft in 2023, up nearly 60% compared to the year before. And in the fourth quarter of last year, incidents were up 71% compared to a year earlier. Most theft happened at warehouses and distribution centers, with California, Texas, and Illinois seeing the most incidents. The commodity most targeted by thieves last year was food and beverage products. There were less than 200 reports of those products being stolen in 2022, but nearly 500 last year. The House truck parking bill continues to pick up support. Congresswoman Hillary Scholten is the latest lawmaker to sign on to H.R. 2367 as a co-sponsor. The Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act would pump $755 million into truck parking projects nationwide over a 3-year period. The bill is truly bipartisan. With Representative Scholten, it's an even split party-wise, with 24 Republicans and 24 Democrats joining the bill's original sponsor, Representative Mike Bost of Illinois. Keep the pressure on your elected representatives by checking out OOIDA's Fighting for Truckers website, a one-stop shop for making your voice heard. The Tennessee DOT is considering adding toll lanes to a busy stretch of Interstate 24, but wants to hear from the public before making any decisions. The idea is to add a toll lane between Nashville and Murfreesboro to free up congestion. Only the state DOT is referring to them as choice lanes. The project would take shape over several years. Officials say construction wouldn't start until at least 2026. In the meantime, you can weigh in on the idea. We've got a link to do that at landlinenow.com. Problems were reported at DMV offices across several states on Thursday. The issue seems resolved now, but the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators, which provides software to DMV offices, says a cloud connectivity issue was to blame. The outage lasted for about 2.5 hours on Thursday morning, during which time agencies couldn't issue licenses or vehicle titles. The American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators says they're looking into what happened. And finally, it's day 2 of the Mid-America Trucking Show in Louisville, Kentucky. Landline Now's Ashley Blackford is there and has more. Ashley.
Another busy day here at the Kentucky Expo Center. Events, seminars, and exhibitors filled the schedule for today. Many attendees filtered through the OOIDA booth, including David Hutchinson, who's been coming to MATS for the past 20 years.
How has it changed over the past 2 decades?
I don't think it's changed all that much. Maybe the trucks have changed, but the people haven't. It's all pretty good.
What keeps you coming back year after year?
That's a good question. Just meet some of the old guys that sell stuff, and I talk to them on the phone, but I don't really see them. So we all just kind of meet. And it's just like OOIDA. I come here and see you guys, but I don't ever get to Missouri, so this is the only time I get to see you guys.
Yeah, great opportunity to stop by and get to know the people you talk to on the phone.
And then I have a 17-year-old, and he's big into this. So it's a good way for him to kind of see from the ground up. And he's been doing this show since he was 5.
I caught up with Ron and Ann Young, who were walking through the OOIDA booth.
I became a lifetime member to OOIDA. I've been a member since 2000, but finally reached the stage where I bought the lifetime.
What made you make that decision?
Got tired of renewing it, and finally was where it was due to the age at the right price.
When did you become a lifetime or an OOIDA member?
2002, 2001. I think it's 2001, I believe.
What prompted you to do that?
I was owner operator out west in the Pacific Northwest. So always been owner operator stuff. So.
What do you haul?
Right now, I'm just starting back up. I left and went into construction for a while, and so I'm going to specialize in heavy equipment and agriculture equipment.
Why is it important to, obviously not just be a lifetime member, but be a member of OOIDA?
For the help fight the political and just all the different services and support they provide. It's very valuable. Plus, I like Landline Now, too.
Frank Law was strolling through the show with his 2 grandchildren in tow.
What's it like taking them around the truck show?
Very interesting. They keep me hopping.
What do they think of it?
I think they like it. Do you like it, Patch? Yeah. Yeah, they're having a big time getting the goodies.
Now, you probably just got in. What are some of the things that they've liked so far?
Walking underneath the semi over in the south wing. They love that.
Do you want to be a truck driver?
Yeah.
You do? How come you want to be a truck driver? Does it seem like a cool job?
Can I ride a tractor?
And is that fun?
Yeah.
Yeah?
MATS continues throughout the day tomorrow. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford. Scott, back to you.
Thanks, Ashley. And that's Landline Now News for today. I'm Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Scott. Congratulations to Keith Gibbon of Graceville, Minnesota. He's received the OOIDA Safe Driving Award for 43 years of safe, accident-free driving. That's the equivalent of a car driver going 323 years without causing a single accident. The OOIDA Safe Driving Award program is sponsored by Shell Rotella, and if you're interested in receiving the Safe Driving Award, you can find a link to more information on our website, landlinenow.com. Marty Ellis and OOIDA's tour truck, The Spirit of the American Trucker, are at the Mid-America Trucking Show in Louisville, Kentucky. That's located at the Kentucky Expo Center. Stop in, say hi to Marty, and join OOIDA for a $10 discount. Next, Carrie Wierakowski, CVSA's Director of Inspection Programs, explains some changes to the out-of-service criteria. Scott Thompson discusses the Truck Leasing Task Force and more with Mark Schrimmer and Ryan Wachowski of Landline Magazine, and we'll hear from OOIDA's Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. We'll be right back. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Penske owns and operates some of the best-maintained vehicles on the planet. Our used trucks come with a 5-year maintenance report and pre-sale inspection. So if you're in the market for a top-quality pre-owned truck, look no further. Search our inventory today at PenskeUsedTrucks.com.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off Truckstop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2023 when you purchase Load Board Pro.
Buckling up keeps everyone safe on the roads. Learn more at www.sharetheroadsafely.gov. Paid for by FMCSA.
Welcome back to the show. The Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance has made a few changes to its out-of-service criteria. They go into effect on April 1st, and joining us to discuss what's new is Carrie Warkowski. Carrie is CVSA's Director of Inspection Programs, and she joins us on the line now. So we can start, I think, with CVSA updating its out-of-service criteria here. Before we get into what's new, can you just talk a little bit about what goes into an update like this? What does that process look like?
Sure. So CVSA out-of-service criteria comes from the work within the respective committees. The committees are made up of law enforcement and industry folks, and for the purposes of the vehicle stuff, a lot of vehicle manufacturers and people like that are involved in the decision. So when an out-of-service condition or change is drafted, the committee drafts it. It then goes as an action item to the board of directors. The board of directors of CVSA vote on whether they believe that it should be placed into the out-of-service criteria. If they vote for it, then it goes onto a ballot for all the lead agency contacts to vote on in the fall after the fall conference. And then it's a majority vote. So once all the votes are in, providing the members voted for the change, then the change is implemented into the out-of-service criteria for the implementation date of April 1st, 2024.
Yeah, so clearly this is a process. I think that's important to note here because, there may be questions out there from people who wonder how these things kind of make it in. And clearly they are well researched and well talked about by the time they get into the handbook here. So starting April 1st, we've got 11 new items added or changed within this criteria. We've got a number of changes that are maybe a little bit bigger, maybe some a little bit smaller. I want to kind of run through these here, and you can kind of tell me what they are and what they mean for people out there. Let's start with this item here. We've got some new language regarding camshaft bushings within braking systems. Talk a little bit about this, why this change was made, and what it means.
Right. So that particular one, there was an issue request sent in by an inspector at Roadside who had done an inspection on, I believe, 3 or 4 different vehicles at different times, and photos were sent in where the camshaft bushing was completely missing in the brake. And for a long, long time, we have had an inspection bulletin that said that missing and worn camshaft bushings are not to be cited as violations because it will inevitably result in a different brake violation that we already have documented. For the most part, when you have worn camshaft bushings or missing bushings, you'll also have push rod stroke problem. So we already deal with the push rod stroke issue. So why deal with 2 things at once? And if they're not worn bad enough and the brake stroke is still within spec, then it's really not bad enough that we're going to worry about a violation. But in this particular case, the bushing was completely gone and the camshaft had moved inside the spider casting to a manner where the S-cam, when it rotated, it was rotating up against the brake drum. So there was no push rod stroke measurement problem, but we didn't have a brake that was operating either, not like it should, because the S-cam wasn't rotating on the rollers anymore. So there was brake manufacturers in the room, and they said that's an ineffective brake. The missing camshaft bushing should now be part of the 20% criteria if that is the case, and a worn camshaft bushing will still not be. So that resulted in 2 different things. One, adding missing camshaft bushings into the 20% criteria. So in other words, that would be one defective brake, not necessarily out of service, unless you have more than 20% of all the brakes in the combination ineffective. But then it also resulted in us modifying the camshaft bushing bulletin to indicate that worn camshaft bushings are not a violation, but missing camshaft bushings are. So as of April 1, you'll see a new inspection bulletin posted to match and go with the out of service change that's in the 20% criteria.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a great description of what's going on there. You did mention one thing, and I wanted to kind of follow up with you here, because a section on the 20% criteria, I think it trips people up sometimes, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, because it does get a little confusing, right? Can you just talk a little bit about what that is? And I think there is a change also related to that, right? That's taking effect April 1st.
Yeah, so the brake section is split up into basically three sections. So if you have a service brake violation, so the easiest one I can come up with right now is brake adjustment. So you have one brake that's out of adjustment. That is one service brake out of, let's say, 10 on your combination. That alone will not be enough to place your vehicle out of service, because we're looking for more than 20% of your service brakes being ineffective. So then as soon as you go to having two brakes out of adjustment beyond a quarter inch, now you've got that 20% and your combination would be placed out of service. The next section of the out of service criteria for brakes is related to steering. So if you have a contaminated brake lining on a third axle of a truck, that's one defective brake towards the 20% calculation. But if you have one contaminated brake on the steer axle of the truck, more severe, because now it's going to affect your steering. So a contaminated lining on the steer axle will automatically place your vehicle out of service. So that's the second part of the brake criteria. And then there's a third part of the brake criteria where you've got defects that automatically place the combination out of service regardless. And for the most part, those are defects where, like an air tank falling off or a hole in a brake hose. If you have a hole in a brake hose, you're going to lose brake pressure throughout the entire unit, and it's going to affect the entire combination if you can't maintain your air. If you've got a spring brake that's about to fly out of the back of the spring brake housing, that's an imminent hazard, and that needs to be placed out of service regardless of what's going on with your service brakes. So they're more severe brake violations that stand alone. So that was another change in the out of service criteria. Sometimes when people are reading the out of service criteria and they're on a specific page, they don't necessarily know whether they're in the 20% area, whether they're in the steering axle area, or whether they're in the independent brake area. So we put watermarks on the brake criteria sections so that somebody, when they're on, a page within the 20%, it says 20% criteria down the side, so that they realize that that's the section that they're in.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a great idea right there. I want to keep moving through these changes because we've only gotten to a couple, and there are several more here. Another one came as a result of something that I believe at least maybe you hadn't seen before, or at least some people hadn't seen before. It's related to coupling devices. Can you tell us about that change and I guess the update that came out of this situation that popped up out there?
Yeah. So that one was in relation to a vehicle that was stopped at a scale again, and the actual drawbar for the pintle hook was not in the pintle hook. It was underneath the bumper and stuck underneath the truck. So it wasn't it wasn't connected at all. So when it came in, the inspector was like, I don't have anything to put him out of service for. So that was a simple change, actually, that when you're using a pintle hook, you need to be using it. So the out of service was just amended to say not in use when required. So basically you have a truck, you have a trailer with a pintle hook device, and the eye is not in the pintle hook. It's somehow connected to the truck some other way. So no, I have never seen that before, because normally the trailer won't even be there if it's not connected correctly. But this was a situation where that was the case. Then it morphed into a discussion about ball hitches. So they put this same information in for ball hitches, that it had to be used if it's required. And then it morphed into a slightly more further conversation about mismatched ball hitches. So you have a drawbar that says that it needs a 2 5/8 ball, and you're using a truck that has a 1 7/8 ball hitch on it. So they added the word mismatched in there. So if you have a mismatched ball with a ball hitch, then there's an out-of-service criteria for that.
Yeah, those seem like common sense changes. And obviously, as you mentioned there, it's something that popped up in the real world, and you make adjustments to make sure that everybody's being safe out there. So that makes sense. Let's move on here. Another item related to lights, or I guess rather driving without them at night. What's the change here?
So actually, this was an interesting one. So I'll give you an example. A truck is driving down the road. It's 11 o'clock at night, and the driver has not turned his lights on. So there's no tail lights, no ID lights, no lights at all. So the vehicle is stopped, and the question was asked because it says they're required lights to be on, so headlights and tail lamps, and they're not on simply because the driver didn't turn them on. Should he be out of service or should he not be? After discussion, it was determined that no, he should not be placed out of service for that. The driver can absolutely be charged under state law for not turning his lights on. He's supposed to have his lights on at 11 o'clock at night. But when the inspector starts the inspection and has the driver turn his lights on with the key in the on position, if the headlights are working and the taillights are working, there are no equipment violations and there is no out-of-service condition. It is solely up to the inspector whether or not the inspector charges them under state law for not having them turned on at the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. I imagine that was a interesting conversation as that was, going back and forth on that one.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
But that was the result of that discussion.
There you go. We've got one more change here I think we'll probably be able to hit on here regarding leaks in the tread area. And this one I think relates to automatic tire inflation systems, right?
It does. Yeah, this is a big change. So basically, as of today, because it's March at the moment, so as of today, if an inspector stops a vehicle, equipped or not, with automatic tire inflation systems, if they hear an audible leak, then that trailer or that truck is put out of service for whatever tire is leaking. As of April 1st, if they stop the same trailer and the trailer is not equipped with automatic tire inflation systems, nothing changes. But if it is equipped with automatic tire inflation system and they hear an audible air leak, they will inspect that tire. They will check the pressure in the tire. And if the ATIS system is keeping up the leak and it is not gone down, and this is only applying in the tread area, by the way, not the sidewall. If you have a leak in the sidewall, you will still be placed out of service. But if it's like a nail in a tire on the tread area, then if the inspector checks the pressure in the tire and the ATIS is maintaining the pressure, then still a violation, still will receive that violation on their inspection report, but they will not be placed out of service for that tire. They will be allowed to continue until the end of the trip, fix that tire before next redispatch.
Gotcha.
So that will be the difference between the two, whether they're equipped or not.
I wasn't keeping count. I'm not sure how many we got through there, but is there anything else that you think people should be aware of in terms of changes taking effect on April 1st? Anything we didn't talk about maybe?
Those are the main ones. The only other one was there was a note added to the bottom of the lighting section that if you have lights that are, say you need brake lights or turn signals and the maximum height is like 72 inches and the lens color is supposed to be red, and instead you have them at 80 inches and or the lens happens to be amber for whatever reason, those are violations of the federal regulations, but there was a note added that we will not place the truck out of service for those violations. The light has to either be not there, obscured, or inoperative.
There you go. Obviously recommend that people go check out these changes before April 1st, obviously. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, Carrie, about International Road Check. It's coming up in May. Any advice for folks out there as we inch closer to that enforcement blitz?
No, other than, the majority of the inspectors will be out there and they will be doing level 1 inspections. The focus this year is tractor protection systems. That doesn't mean that they're going to just check tractor protection systems, but drivers should know how to check them. Inspectors should be checking them as well. So we just decided to target that aspect of the inspection procedure to better educate both the drivers and make sure that the inspectors are doing that portion of the test in the 37-step inspection procedure during a level 1.
Our thanks to Carrie Workowski of CVSA for her time. For more information on the new out-of-service criteria, enforcement blitzes, or CVSA programs, check out cvsa.org. We'll step aside for just a moment and pay some bills, but stick around. There's more Landline Now coming up right after this.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
Dispatch, I picked up that load of steel, so I'm ready to roll.
Sounds good. Remember, we're getting paid by weight, so make sure to use a CAT scale.
I wouldn't weigh anywhere else.
Forget miss accuracy when you're truck on a CAT scale.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
And we're back. Scott Thompson here, joined in Studio A by Mark Schrimmer and Ryan Witkowski of Landline Magazine, which I suppose could mean several things. But today it means we're going to rap about some of the stories they've been covering for another roundtable discussion. Ryan, Mark, good to see you.
Yeah, likewise, Scott.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for being here. Let's start with an issue you've been following closely, Mark. I know the Truck Leasing Task Force. They've been meeting pretty regularly over the past several months now. The most recent meeting, Thursday, at the Mid-American Trucking Show in Louisville. And your takeaways, Mark. We've had a lot of good discussions from this group, and it continued at Matt's here.
Yeah, I mean, I think first we're going to back up a little bit about what this Truck Leasing Task Force is looking specifically at these lease purchase agreements that are often predatory in nature, where the carrier kind of has control of the debt on the loan, and often you hear these horror stories where these drivers don't realize, what they're signing exactly, and they might work a full pay period, and then by the end of it, they owe money back to the company.
A lot of money.
And there's all of these, different costs, whether it's maintenance fees or whatever else that they're not expecting, that they're not made aware of at the time of signing the contract. And that's basically what this is about. Congress mandated to start this task force, start looking at it. And what's been great about this at Matt, this was a real opportunity because you have thousands of drivers already there, and you have the opportunity for drivers to come up, make comments, tell their stories, and tell what these issues are and what, some possible ideas to remedy it.
And here's the thing about this task force, and not to compare task forces or committees, but we've had the Underwrite Committee. We've talked about this.
Sure.
It's been a bit chaotic, I think we can say.
Yeah, that's more than fair.
More than fair there. This, however, the Truck Leasing Task Force, everybody who speaks seems to agree that this is a problem, that there is a massive problem with the way things are set up right now, because as you point out, people are getting taken advantage of, and it's a routine occurrence. This isn't like a one-off kind of thing. It happens all the time. The question I have, and I'm real curious to see how this pans out, because we have agreement here. What is a solution going to look like? And they have been maybe sort of tiptoeing around this idea of where they may be going. But I am real curious to see, since we do have pretty much a consensus, what that's going to look like. I don't know. You don't have the answer necessarily, but I'm sure it's something that you're looking for as well.
Yeah, I think, what we're looking at is maybe kind of two sides here. I think everybody, like you said, for the most part, that's on this task force recognizes that there's a problem. FMCSA's chief counsel was there, recognizes that it's a problem. But I think it's basically the divide is where you have a lot of people on the task force that are looking at, hey, most of the issues involve where the carrier owns the debt. They control how much, they basically can, if you go to get a loan on your house or your car or whatever, they're not the ones that you have the loan with deciding how much money you make every week.
Yeah.
But in these cases, it is. So if, like a driver's brought up, if you upset somebody or whatever else, they kind of have you in a very bad position.
I believe over a barrel is the expression you're looking for there.
I appreciate that. But so, you can either just remove that type of lease purchase where the carrier is no longer in charge of the debt, that if you want to do this, you need to do it through a third party to get the loan and go about it that way. The other side of it, there are a few people on the task force that are saying, hey, there are a few examples of success stories, so should we instead create regulations and rules rather than just eliminating that whole segment.
Well, and I think largely, too, like that's the exception and not the rule. And I think that's
100%.
the overall point. But when you talk about maybe some of the remedies, too, like I've covered a little bit of things with truck leasing and broker carrier agreements and the biggest issue is the fact that a lot of folks just don't read these contracts that they're signing and they're getting into.
Or they do, and they
don't understand it.
Or they think they understand it, and they don't.
And I think maybe some of the way to remedy that is to come up with more boilerplate language that's a little bit easier to understand and uniform across the board, because every lease purchase agreement and every broker carrier agreement is going to be slightly different, but they also understand, like the brokers and the carriers that are leasing out these trucks, they understand what language to put in there to put them at an advantage.
Yeah, and I think part of this too is we also do have to protect some people from themselves. I mean, we had an example of one of people spoke at the meeting that said they've been involved in 9 of these, and only 2 of them were on the up and up.
Yeah.
So if you keep doing it over, and I'm not trying to speak poorly of there's a lot of people there's for different reasons that get involved in these, but that's the thing. We need to protect people, because even though they know that it might not turn out well for whatever reason, people keep doing it. So we do need to protect people from themselves at some point.
Yeah, and it's one of these things where enforcement, whatever they come up with, enforcement's going to be key, and we've seen enforcement not be carried out in other areas, such as broker fraud. And again, we've got these bad apples spoiling the entire bunch, and it's putting people in a real bad situation. So curious to see what comes out of that. You can obviously follow our coverage on landline.media of the Truck Leasing Task Force. Speaking of enforcement, Ryan, things have gotten real in British Columbia.
I have been wildly interested in this story for the past several months because I personally think it could have long-reaching impacts across Canada and maybe even trickle into the United States, as we'll have an opinion blog coming up here on Landline Media from John Bindle about this topic. But to back up a little bit and give you some background, back in December, the provincial government in British Columbia rolled out higher fines and penalties for any carriers involved in infrastructure crashes. So you strike a bridge, you strike an overpass, whatever the case may be. If it's an infrastructure crash, you're going to pay a hefty fine. And at that time, they took the fines as high as they could possibly go by legislation. Well, fast forward to today, and what was it, maybe a week or so ago, they rolled out a new proposal to raise those fines even higher to 100,000 Canadian dollars for carriers who strike a bridge or overpass. And on top of that, if you are convicted and found guilty of the violations, you could face up to 18 months in prison as well. And, British Columbia Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Rob Fleming said that it sends a message to commercial truck drivers that they're responsible for the safe transportation of goods and services on our road, and a lax attitude towards safety will not be tolerated. Now, since they rolled those fines out in December, there have been 6 infrastructure crashes throughout British Columbia. One of those carriers actually had their license to operate in BC completely canceled. So it has had impacts on people. And again, we will have an opinion blog coming out from John Bindle here soon. But those types of things that they're trying to do in British Columbia are starting to have an impact in the other provinces around Canada, because there is an issue when it comes to enforcement because there's so many different, regulations province to province. And so being able to say, hey, you're suspended in British Columbia, but you can still operate in Alberta or wherever you may be, that's the problem. And so all of the transportation ministers got together in February, and they basically tasked the council to say, hey, we've got to figure out how to fix this and fill these gaps so that way we don't have these unsafe carriers operating, over provinces. And so that the biggest issue, I think, for me is that throughout this whole thing, British Columbia and the ministry has continued to say, we understand that the vast majority of carriers operate, safely and follow the rules and abide by all those things. Well, it seems as though they're taking a very narrow-focused approach, though, because this applies to the mass, and it's if you have a problem with a few carriers, then it should be more narrow-focused towards those few carriers and figuring out what the issues are there, rather than just penalizing everybody standard.
Yeah, and I can understand both sides of this. I understand why the province there would have a real concern about this, but as you point out there's a real concern of, are they overstepping here and
sure,
and throwing a blanket on everybody here that's going to weigh everybody down.
It's been somewhat ambiguous too when they talk about the elevation, the escalation of those fines, because obviously carriers that are involved in multiple ones. He's the one that had theirs canceled. They were involved in 6 bridge strikes over the past 3 years. So I mean, there is some precedent for when that happens, but they've been somewhat ambiguous as to how often it would incur, how quickly those fines would escalate, and whether or not you're facing 18 months in prison for accidentally hitting a bridge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the point. There is stuff happens. If one stuff happens, for lack of a better term, you could be out a bunch of money, and 18 months in prison is that stands out pretty glaringly there. We've got a few minutes here. I want to make sure we touch on a couple issues that we've got left here on the agenda. Washington, D.C., Congress, Mark, we've seen quite a bit of action on the DRIVE Act. This is the bill that would bar FMCSA from imposing a speed limiter mandate. It seems like we're getting some momentum there because more and more lawmakers are signing on.
Yeah, we got 40 co-sponsors in the House now, 10 in the Senate. Obviously, still a long ways to go. But I think more and more are starting to see the issue, and I think states' rights, as we've talked about before, is a big part of it. We just had in Tennessee where they had split speed limits where it was 65 miles an hour for cars and 55 for trucks. And they did some studies, did analysis, and they decided 70 miles an hour for everybody is the safest route. That's what they decided to do. The problem that you would have if FMCSA is able to go forward with the speed limiter mandate, if one of the speeds that's thrown out there is 60 miles an hour, basically that would, in effect, take away Tennessee's right to determine their own speed limits, what's safe for their state, for their interstate highway. And, that's the issue. And I think once you're getting more and more lawmakers to understand that and understand their specific state's needs that they represent, more and more are signing on. The big thing that we need here is right now, all 50 of these are Republicans. Once we can get an independent, a couple of Democrats to come along, in some of those states like Montana, you talk about some of those rural states, I think once that shoe drops, then this will really get rolling.
Yeah, and just to underline the urgency of this, FMCSA is expected, we think in May, maybe, to release more information about this.
It's a fluid timeline.
It really has been.
It was supposed to be last summer, then it was supposed to be December, now it's supposed to be May. So I'm not saying that it's definitely going to be, but right now, if you look on there, that is when it's projected. So it could be coming any time here this spring, early summer. There's no time to waste. Even though, government bodies often do waste a lot of time.
No, come on.
But I urge all truckers out there that are against this to not waste that time.
Fightingfortruckers.com, newly redesigned.
Still has that new website smell, actually.
It does, yes. That is a great way to do this. And really, honestly, I know we say this all the time, but honestly, if a congressional office is inundated with a bunch of emails or calls or what have you about a particular issue, they do pay attention to that. So it really does make a difference. I know it doesn't seem like it's going to make a difference, but it really can. So use that website, fightingfortruckers.com, and get your voice out there. Real quick, as we kind of alluded to there, Matt's is underway. You guys' invitations get lost in the mail, or?
I mean, I'm a little upset. I thought we were going to go get to see the Muhammad Ali Museum this year.
That would be great. I thought you were banned from Kentucky now. Is that not correct?
Is that not correct?
I thought 1 year, I don't know.
I dipped in the bourbon pretty hard last year. I'm not going to lie. So I got my work done, and then I played.
No, it's a great show every year, and we love being able to hear those stories and talk to drivers. And I know we have several people from Landline out there, and we'll hear those.
Plenty of coverage coming up about MATS and a lot of great stuff going on there. We mentioned the Truck Leasing Task Force meeting, but they've got also a bunch of other sessions going on.
And you can go see Marty's pretty face, too.
Marty is there as well, along with a whole bunch of people. So check it out if you're out there, and check out landline.media and our program here for updates as they come over the coming days. Ryan, Mark, pleasure as always.
As always.
Thank you.
Our thanks once again to Ryan Witkowski and Mark Schrimmer of Landline Magazine. You can check out their excellent reporting again every day on landline.media and in every issue of the magazine itself. We've got to take another break, but don't go anywhere. We've got more Landline Now to come.
Capital Reman, your leader in remanufactured diesel engines and components, is celebrating its 10th anniversary. Let us help you avoid costly downtime and repairs by visiting capitalreman.com today. Use code OOIDA10 to receive your member benefits.
Stock up on Howe's Diesel Treat, the nation's most trusted anti-gel. And to be safe from the harshest winter conditions, make sure you have Howe's Diesel Lifeline on hand, the fastest-acting gelling rescue product. Available nationwide, Howe's products are designed to keep you rolling through the toughest conditions. Visit howesproducts.com.
Attention professional drivers, are you behind on your tax filings? You owe money? Integrity Tax Relief Group frees drivers from IRS trouble. You watch the road, we'll keep an eye on the IRS. Call now. 855-976-4291.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Welcome back to Landline Now. If you've listened to the show at all, you've heard us mention the fightingfortruckers.com website a number of times, and it's worth mentioning that there is a new update to the website that makes it easier than ever to reach out to your lawmakers and make a difference in Washington, D.C. Joining us now to talk about the new website is Jay Grimes of OIDA's Washington, D.C. office. Jay, good to see you.
Great to be back.
So we have a new shiny thing to talk about here, but before that, I'm hoping everyone listening has already visited the fightingfortruckers.com website multiple times and used it already to reach out to lawmakers. But assuming there are folks out there who have not done that, who haven't visited this website, tell us a little bit about what it is designed to do.
Yeah, fightingfortruckers.com is really designed to make it simple, quick, fast for drivers on the road to contact their lawmakers through the different call to actions and campaigns that we've posted on the website. And really that's going to be showing off the critical issues and legislation that we're either supporting, opposing, but want to get the word out, want to make sure lawmakers know where small business truckers stand on important trucking legislation that's been introduced.
And we've kind of explained this or described this website as a one-stop shop for doing just that, right? For reaching out to lawmakers and letting them know why these issues are so important to truck drivers and kind of where they should be leaning in terms of legislation. That is really the idea here, right? It really is the idea of coming to this website. There's a few clicks, and you can literally just kind of use a form letter to explain to them what's going on with speed limiters or whatever it may be.
Yeah, right. If you're an OIDA member, if you've signed up to receive our call to actions on fightingfortruckers.com, you just got to, enter in your personal contact information, which is really just your name and address, and it'll send a letter automatically to your lawmakers. You don't have to necessarily go out of your way to look up your lawmakers. It'll send the message to them. And the great thing about it is we try and make it easier by putting together messages, but anyone can edit the message to make it to say what they want to say. And this has been a feature we've had in place for the last few years and have really, I think, gotten great feedback, great participation, because it is really simple and quick. But this week we've launched the new fightingfortruckers.com website, and it's got a really great look to it, just as easy as before. But in addition to contacting your lawmakers, we're also going to have a whole lot more information on the specific issues. So if you're on the phone with a congressional staffer or a lawmaker, if you're out meeting with these lawmakers, you can have the latest data, the latest information, talking points to make your voice heard. And right now we're focusing on speed limiters, so stopping that mandate, improving truck parking with the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act, restroom access, fighting back against broker fraud, and real simple stuff to go on and take a look at. And hopefully the new website is a little more fun to look around on, and we've really got some great information on there.
We've talked about this before as well, but I think it's worth repeating because I know you hear some of the resistance out there when you make that plea for people to reach out and call their lawmaker or email their lawmaker, whatever it may be. The idea that what difference does it make? I'm just one person. They don't really want to hear from me. They don't care. The counter to that is it really does make a difference, especially when you have a number of people reaching out on one particular issue. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because you've been in these offices before. Yep. What happens when there is a flood of emails or calls about one particular issue, perhaps speed limiters? What happens in that congressional office that might help move the cause forward?
I've been at OOIDA for almost 10 years, and I think our greatest strength is in our numbers and in our unity. And we've got 150,000 members out there, and at least a few in every congressional district. And that really helps making the case to those offices. And when they hear from drivers out on the road, it really makes a difference to those folks in Washington because, frankly, and unfortunately, not a whole lot of elected officials know too much about the trucking industry. But when they hear from a driver who's been out on the road, maybe has experience with a speed limiter or has seen, other drivers react in a terrible way when they get stuck behind trucks who are speed limited out on the road, they can start to make a little bit of a connection, and the light goes off with that lawmaker, with their staffer. And then when they get a few dozen phone calls about the issue or hundreds and hundreds of letters asking them to support or oppose legislation, those numbers add up and really helps us make the point across and really, give lawmakers a better understanding of what the trucking issues are all about.
And again, the fightingfortruckers.com website, the beauty of this website is that you can pop your name in there, you can pop your email address in there, you pop your zip code in, and it will essentially, put together the lawmakers that are in your district or the ones that represent you, right?
Yeah.
And you can reach out to them directly.
It'll automatically send that lawmaker a letter. It'll provide the phone number if you want to call that office. Really makes it simple where if you've only got 30 seconds, you can get on there, fightingfortruckers.com, support the DRIVE Act, per se, H.R. 3039, to prevent speed limiters, and that'll send the letter. If you've got a little bit more time, you can write your own message, share your own personal experiences there. So if you're on the go, it's easy. If you want to take a little more time, look at all the information we have on the speed limiter issue, look at all the resources we've linked to with the new website. It can be really helpful, and it really does make a difference when lawmakers, when congressional staff hear from the men and women of the trucking industry who have the day-to-day experience of being on the road.
And I think we should mention, too, that OIDA did put out a call to action, I think late last month, late February, to approximately 150,000 members, urging them to reach out to lawmakers on the speed limiter bills in particular, right? We've got one in the House, we've got one in the Senate, and I don't think it's a coincidence that we have seen more co-sponsors sign on in recent weeks after that as well. So again, not to get on the soapbox here, but if there were to be a flood again of emails that went out on this issue over the next week or so, that is going to gain the attention of people there, and which, by extension will garner attention on the issue.
Yeah, not only do we see those co-sponsor figures go up usually every time we send a call to action, but we're getting feedback from the congressional staff that we have relationships once they, hear from dozens, hundreds of truckers on a specific issue. And if you're not getting our call to actions, it's critical to go to fightingfortruckers.com, sign up for those, just enter your email, and you can, get an alert every time we see a bill or a regulation being proposed where we think it's going to be very important for lawmakers or folks at FMCSA and DOT to hear from OIDA members.
Speed limiters, the speed limiter mandate, I should say, truck parking, Fair Labor Standards Act, overtime exemption, just a few of the issues that are going around right now that you're asking for people to reach out to. It seems like speed limiters kind of takes the priority right now, but other issues that you think might be important to reach out?
Yeah, restroom access, always a good one, broker fraud. And, right now on the fightingfortruckers.com homepage, we've got our 3 call to actions that we've prioritized that you can make your voices heard can also go to our trucking policy page right up at the top, and you can see all the active call to actions that we're working on. So sign up if you're not. Visit fightingfortruckers.com. Make your voice heard. Have an impact. We know there's a lot to fix in the trucking industry, and we've got to make a difference.
Jay, we appreciate your time. We encourage everybody to check out the website and be a part of the process here. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
That was Jay Grimes, OIDA Director of Federal Affairs. And in case you didn't catch that website, one of the 24 times we mentioned it there, it's fightingfortruckers.com. You don't need an account or username or really anything else, I don't believe, other than your name and your voice. And our voice is going to fade out here now as we close out the show. We do thank you for listening to Landline Now, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife,
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
Chrome.
And I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit ooida.com.